doctors and were fired. I have friends who were dancers with professional modern dance companies and were fired. I know so many people were teachers and were fired. And it just felt like if I could find a lawyer who would stand up for my case, it is a case that speaks on so many levels to so many of the things that all of us have faced and should never have and should never again. And so I'm pursuing a case that is currently, we have to do an appeal. The expense, what I've realized through this experience is that any individual against something larger, be it an organization or a government body, the fight is a huge one to carry and an expensive one to carry. And so I did finally, after months of pursuing this as a family, I did finally create a Give, Send, Go campaign to support being able to pursue it further.
Hello and welcome to Teaching Liberty. I'm Stephanie Edmonds, and in this video, I'm going to introduce you to a warrior mama who is currently suing her former employer for letting her go due to the vaccine mandate and other discriminatory practices. As you know, I'm currently involved in several lawsuits for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccination and being fired from my job. Those are against the City of New York, the New York City Department of Education, and my former union, the United Federation of Teachers. However, Jennifer did not work directly for the Department of Education, and she was not a member of the union. So her circumstances are a little bit different, and she is taking on this battle all by herself. But I hope that's not the case for much longer. She needs our help because funding lawsuits are expensive. So down in the description below, you can find her Give, Send, Go and help her file her appeal for being wrongfully terminated for the job which she had worked for over a decade. All because she refused to get the COVID-19 vaccination. This conversation is an all too real reminder of the still ongoing impacts from the COVID-19 vaccine mandates and really all of the arbitrary and capricious policies done in the name of the coronavirus pandemic. But it is also a reminder of why we do this, and all of the amazing humans out there who are standing right by our side, fighting that good fight. So they can lock us down, they can close our schools, they can take our jobs, but they can never take the joy that we have for life. So without any further ado, let's talk with Jennifer and her beautiful son, Jasper. Hello, Jen. Thank you for joining me here today. I see you are in the middle of being a mom, and I appreciate you taking the time. So how are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. And I am here with my son, Jasper. And I guess I'll just start by saying that the reason I feel inclined to fight and to find a different level of strength in myself during the past few years has been because of him. I have been a teacher. I went to college for dance education. I've been a teacher for much of my life and always loved working with children and would really have done anything for kids at any juncture. And then becoming a parent during the craziness of the last couple of years has taken that to a profound and different level.
And you, like I, were a teacher in New York City. And I'm a part of a couple different lawsuits, but you reached out to me and you said you're actually pursuing a lawsuit on your own. So can you tell me a little bit about your case specifically and what grounds you're pursuing it on?
Sure. I'm actually what's known as a teaching artist. So I was not employed by the New York City public schools, but I worked with my full-time job for 13 years was that I worked with a nonprofit organization that partners with New York City public schools. So my reality pre-2020 was that I went into a different public school each day of the week. And for many years, I was going to the same public schools every year. I went to college for dance ed. I found that job right out of college. Actually, during my senior year of college, I found the organization. I loved their work. I was really impressed by their approach that engaged all children, seemingly regardless of ability, disability, gender, race, anything, like just all kids dancing joyfully together. It was really inspiring to me. And through the years, I started part-time, I became full-time. I felt that, it shaped so much of my life and led me to other opportunities. And I also was a big part of shaping what was happening with the organization. And in 2020, when things began to shift, my husband works in emergency management, and I guess we weren't really surprised when things when on March 13th, when things shut down. It wasn't a shock to our family because we kind of knew what was happening globally. So I'll say that through all of it, I felt maybe more prepared than some to take it, to help things move to virtual when they seemed to need to be virtual. I helped the organization create lots of online content, and then, things continued to develop and change. And I'll pause there for a second. I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'll pause there for.
No, that's good context to understand the situation. So you were with this organization, it was a big part of your life. You were a big part of them. You were dealing with the virtual situation. Finally, after some time, we got back into the classroom, but it did seem almost immediately when that happened, the conversation began to switch to mandates around the vaccine. Or at first it wasn't necessarily mandates. It was just like, oh, we have to get, more people vaccinated, especially going into the next school year. And then it seemed quite inevitable. And now I was employed directly by the DOE. I was actually a tenured teacher. So my situation was a little bit different than yours. So other teachers who were contractors, teachers who didn't have tenure, they didn't necessarily have as many legal options as we had. I'm part of a religious exemption case. I'm part of a case that is challenging based on civil service laws that pertain to people who have the protection of tenure and as it relates to the union, which you weren't necessarily a member of. So let's fast forward to August, September, once the vaccine mandate is being implemented and rolled out. What were your options and how did you decide to pursue your own legal action? I was telling you, that sounds so intimidating. I was somebody who doesn't know a lot about the law, and I'm part of these larger lawsuits where other people are the point person. So bring us up to
Yeah. So I'll share just a little bit of my kind of medical background and journey to become a mom. I actually don't think it's very relevant because in general, I don't believe that anyone should have needed a reason to not take a vaccine, what they called a vaccine, but we know that the definition for vaccine had to change in order for them to call it. I don't believe that anybody should have needed a medical history or a religious exemption or any kind of exemption besides a personal desire to not inject themselves with that mRNA shot. So but I will share that we had a long journey. I wasn't able to try. I had what's called a molar pregnancy, which is basically like a growth that is could turn cancerous. So I was observed for almost 2 years through Sloan Kettering and not able to try again during that time. And it was a really intense and sad journey. And in part because of that, and in part because of a bunch of other things, I felt very strongly, my husband and I felt very strongly that while I was pregnant, the vaccines began rolling out at 2021. I was late 2020, early 21, the vaccines were starting to roll out. I finally was able to become pregnant. And we felt very clear right away. They hadn't tested it on pregnant women. I'm not getting it. I wasn't going to get it. And I felt very supported by him and the information that he was sharing with me. And actually, my doctor was on board. He said, I am encouraging most people to get the vaccine, but I understand your reluctance and I'll support what you want to do. I know not a lot of people had that experience, so I was really grateful for that. And then my son actually was born in August of 2021. So it was at that peak time, people were about to go back to school, and New York City public schools, it was kind of bubbling up that they were strongly encouraging. And then it became clear that they were going to mandate the vaccine for public school teachers. And the organization that I worked with wasn't yet mandating it. We were still working from home, and it wasn't clear whether we were going back in. We had worked from home all of the year 2021, the full school year into 2020 into 21. So it was unclear what was going to happen. But I presented, my doctor ended up writing me, my OB ended up writing me a medical exemption, which simply stated that I wasn't taking it. I was breastfeeding and I wasn't taking it. Between us, he knew that studies hadn't been done, and he was supportive of my decision based on my medical history. I was on maternity leave in the start of the 21 school year. De Blasio mandated the vaccine for all city workers and then all workers. And the nonprofit that I worked with followed suit, seemingly without a hitch. Nobody talked about the employee handbook, did not state anything related to whether or not there would be exemptions and on what terms they would be accepted. So I presented a doctor's note to an organization that I had worked with for the whole of my adult life and had strong relationships with and a stellar reputation with. And I assumed that it might be a challenge for them to have me back in my regular capacity. But I thought, I'm a new mom. I may want to work in a different way anyway. I've been contributing virtually so much. I imagined and maybe just wrongly assumed that they would work with me and that they would find some way to offer me a reasonable accommodation that could have been many, many things. And what transpired was simply a phone call from HR, not the artistic director, not my boss, but just HR, a phone call in which she stated, if you don't take, you presented this note, but if you don't take 2 shots of Moderna or Pfizer or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson, the only accommodation that we will be able to offer you is 3 months of unpaid leave with no health benefits. And at the end of that time, you'll have to be vaccinated in order to come back to work.
Wow. So, in one sense, I understand a job is just a job and people have businesses to run. But, when you work in particularly an organization, you've been there for a long time, they could at least have the courtesy to treat you as a decent human being.
Yep.
And not just, oh, that's just some paperwork, pass it along. I expect that from the Department of Education, some faceless bureaucracy, but that's not how I was treated at my school. My administration, they had a real conversation with me and they treated me like a decent person, and they were regretful to see me go. It was not their choice or their decision. And I feel like your organization was in a similar position. I feel like they could have probably stood up for you a little bit more than my bosses as, direct employees of the DOE. They could have tried to provide you that cushion, that reasonable accommodation. We all know there wasn't any real enforcement coming down for them. But they chose to cower in the face of that and betray what seems, obviously we're only getting your side of the story, but you seem like a decent person. So
yeah, I had the sense right away that that the human connection was taken out of the equation. What ended up happening from that moment and that point was that on that phone call after she stated that, I said, I'm not okay with that. this is supposed to be a conversation. I wasn't expecting basically to be terminated at this juncture. I'm still on maternity leave. And she stood her ground, and later they ended up emailing me the next day or 2 days later and saying that I needed to apologize because that phone call was inappropriate, and that some language, not right. They didn't say harassment right away, but they ended up putting in writing that I had behaved inappropriately towards HR. And what I am alleging in my case is that was an excuse for them to find a reason to fire me 3 months later, because they needed a reason. I had an exemption, and they said in writing, "We accept your exemption, and the accommodation we're offering is such, which you're not choosing to take." So they ended up terminating me for harassment, but they never had a meeting with me about harassment. And they ended up telling previous colleagues of mine in writing that the reason that I was terminated was because of unprofessional conduct. And it was after, like I said before, 13 years with like hardly just all positive relationships with everybody at the organization, and positive relationships with the schools I worked in and the children I worked with. And I still to this day can't understand how anyone would believe that though I see myself as stronger and stronger through the months, I'm not someone who it would be completely out of character for me to harass someone. Of course, I was upset and shocked that that's what they were offering me. But that seems rightfully so. And that was what happened. So that is based on what felt like discrimination. And then the word I'm trying to find is something they like what they did to my character, like discrimination.
Oh, defamed your character?
Right. They were willing to put into writing that I harassed someone, and that's the reason I was terminated, rather than telling what I believe to be the truth, was that I was proving to be too difficult for them to work with, and they couldn't find a way to. They didn't want me at work because they were afraid of me because I wasn't getting vaccinated, or they just couldn't find a creative way to make it happen.
And so you're now pursuing legal action. I know the case is ongoing, and so you can't always talk about everything, but what can you tell us about the case? Is there any way that we can support you? Give us all the details that you can, of course.
I'm pursuing legal action for my case, and I feel, and the reason that I did it is because I have friends who were doctors and were fired. I have friends who were dancers with professional modern dance companies and were fired. I know so many people were teachers and were fired. And it just felt like if I could find a lawyer who would stand up for my case, it is a case that speaks on so many levels to so many of the things that all of us have faced and should never have and should never again. And so I'm pursuing a case that is currently, we have to fight an appeal. We have to do an appeal. So the expense, what I've realized through this experience is that any individual against something larger, be it an organization or a government body, the fight is a huge one to carry and an expensive one to carry. And so I did finally, after months of pursuing this as a family, I did finally create a Give, Send, Go campaign to support being able to pursue it further for us and for anyone, because I'm hoping that a win for this case is a win for a lot of cases.
I think Jasper agrees. That was so sweet. Hey, yeah, I'm talking about you. This is the reason we're doing this. So I highly encourage everybody to check out the Give, Send, Go. It's linked in the description down below. You can also learn more about the case. I have other videos that I talk about the other lawsuits that are currently ongoing. I know it's easy in what I'm calling this veil of normalcy to feel like, oh, we've moved on. And certainly there has been some wins in other places of people getting back pay, but New York City, it's a particularly hard place for these battles, but it's a really important one. We're stuck in a pretty progressive circuit, pretty progressive liberal judges. Nonetheless, the cases are ongoing and they can try to run this clock out, but time is on our side. The truth is on our side. And yeah, and you're on our side. So I know we're going to win. Jen, what else should we know before we get out of here about your case and how we can support you?
Just that there are more kids coming into the world who need us to keep fighting for them and for their independence and their freedom of choice and for their health. And so whatever it takes, we have to keep it going.
I agree. And I can't imagine a more resilient and passionate and caring person to stand side by side in this fight with. I really appreciate you doing what you're doing. And like I said, it's only a matter of time. Truth is on our side. God is on our side. And we're on his time. So keep fighting the good fight and we'll keep spreading the word.
Right on. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
And thank you for listening to this conversation. Like Jennifer said, fighting lawsuits is not easy and it is not cheap. So do what you can. Hit that link to the Give, Send, Go in the description down below and let's help get Jennifer's case to an appeal. Just like any lawsuit or any case, you have to poke, you have to prod, you have to see what the courts like and what they don't like, and then you have to try again. She learned a lot from that first time around, and now it's time to appeal and get that justice. It's a long road, but we will continue to walk it. So make sure you've liked this video, share this video with a friend, tell them to check out Jennifer's story and to make a donation, because even though life seems like it's back to normal, there are still very, very real impacts that are ongoing, and we have to continue to fight. And that's exactly what we do here on Teaching Liberty. So make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. Check in on Saturday nights when I go live between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to break down the headlines and go over the trends from the week. And for even more Teaching Liberty, make sure you're following me on social media or head over to teachingliberty.org, because when we think free, we live free.
Come on.